Hello and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast and episode 77. My name is Kevin Pickard and I host a show that delves into the minds of people who have unusual journeys, ones that perhaps deviate from the norm, and hope to inspire others to explore new and exciting journeys themselves. This week we're hearing from an actor and getting a brutally honest insight into what the realities of that journey looks like. Lauren Osborn, actress turned new mum, talks about the realities of the performing arts industry, the key ingredients of how to keep your head above water and your bank balance above zero, and how to enjoy the journey along the way. We explore everything from the challenges with the school system for young creatives, all the way through to some of the key turning points that are of real interest for people from all careers to hear. From all industries, the journey is full of potential opportunities, but constantly putting yourself out there, volunteering, exploring different avenues, you genuinely do create your own luck. And our conversation today with Lauren is a great example of that. I've known Lauren for a few years now, and it's a super fun discussion that is open, honest, and a wonderful reflection of her philosophy on how she approaches her life. Just before we get started, don't forget to give us a quick follow across all the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch our interviews in full as well as see bonus content. All the links you need are in the show notes. Okay, let's get into it and episode 77 of the Rogue Monkey podcast. Lauren Osborn, the acting journey, pulling back the curtain. Hello, Lauren, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. My mum just came around to pick up my baby and asked what I was doing and what we were talking about. And she said, "Oh, Kev is in swimming, Kev." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, what are you talking about?" I said, "Swimming." And she was like, what's he asking you about swimming? And I said, "Oh, about how swimming has impacted my life and things like that." And the weird thing was that she wasn't confused by the fact that swimming has had very little involvement in my life. And she was like, "Oh, right." And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess, because you scuba dive." And I was like, yeah. Actually, fair. I couldn't argue that. So now we have to talk about swimming.
No, we're not going to. I'm escaping from my day job to chat today. So obviously, well, thanks for sharing some time with us. It's going to be an interesting bit of time exploring, I guess, the various hats you wear. But I've given the listeners and viewers already a bit of an introduction to who you are. But let's go from the top. Give us a headline journey as to who you are and kind of your journey to now.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm Lauren. I have two names. Lauren Osborn is my professional name and Lauren Jennings is my married name. I definitely decided to keep my name professionally simply because I could. I was like, keeping that. But yeah, so my journey up till now, I guess, has been kind of standard. Went to drama school instead of university when I turned 18 and left normal school, and then graduated in 2012, had a few fun jobs along the way, and punched out a baby last year. Now I'm here and kind of manoeuvring that life, motherhood, career, and trying to maintain a steady income with another option of career. Yeah, has that answered the question? I'm not sure.
It certainly does, and I think there's 1,001 things. Like I should probably articulate to both the viewers and listeners that I know you outside of the podcast. So it's the shock horror. It's the first podcast I've ever done almost a complete dry run through. So when we went for our walk yesterday,
I gave all the goods yesterday. I haven't got any good things to talk about today.
It makes it a lot easier for me because now I know pretty much exactly the kind of questions I want to ask.
Okay.
I'm quite curious as to where it all started. So going into kind of this performing arts and creative space, was that something you've had as a small child, or, where did that kind of first stick in your mind as being something that you were passionate about?
I feel like there has not been a day in my life where I haven't wanted to be a performer in some description. I have a really vague memory of being at nursery, the wall outside my nursery, and getting my dad to pretend to be, I don't know, a character with me while we were waiting to go into nursery. And it's such a vivid memory of mine. And I feel like I knew there and then, I was like, yep, I'm going to be an actor. And I feel like Dad and I had a conversation about it. Um, and yeah, that was it. And my parents would always then take us to see shows and things as surprises, and it kind of fueled the passion. And my nana was an English and drama teacher just in a normal school, and so she was enthusiastic about my passion for it as well, and would often sign me up for drama clubs and things in the summer holidays and stuff. And yeah, that's kind of where that took hold. I guess I just always loved being the centre of attention. I remember being in the car as a kid, and we'd always be listening to some sort of musical soundtrack, or my mum would be harmonising with things on the radio, and I always used to try and harmonise as well. And I was always so, as a singer, I was always so, when you're a kid, I think anyway, as singers, you listen to people with the natural vibrato in their voice, the little like bit that wobbles throughout the song. And I remember I used to try and do it with my body. I'd be like, ah, and I remember having to sit and watch myself in the mirror and train myself out of that and let my natural vibrato happen, which then took over at whatever age that happened. But I remember my mum being like, Lauren, you've got to stop this if you want it to come. It's gonna come. I was like, okay. That was fun.
So at what point do you go from, because if you ask anyone who's in that kind of creative space when they're in their early years, primary school, even early in secondary school, what do you want to do? They might say, I want to be a singer, or I want to be an actress, or whatever it is. But actually there's a big difference between saying that and then actually following that for a professional part of your life. So at what point did it go from this is a passion and I fill a lot of my spare time outside of the school doing this, to suddenly I'm actually going to try and pursue this for something career wise?
I mean, I genuinely was trying to pursue it as a career from day dot. Like, the second I knew it was something that I could get paid to do, I was trying to do that. So I did an advert when I was 7. That was for bonbons, the toffees that are covered in sherbet. That was fun. And then I did another one a few years later for PC World when I was a teenager, and that was actually terrible money as well, but I just loved everything about it, and that obviously was filmed stuff, which is where the money is, I guess, but theatre wise has just always been, I guess I would have always called myself an actress even before I was professionally a performer. I kind of, all my life I was like, oh yeah, I'm an actor. Like, so what, I don't get paid for it. That's what I am. In the same way that you'd be like, I'm a swimmer, just because you were a kid and swam, you'd still call yourself a swimmer back then. Do you know what I mean? And when I was, it was actually the same year that I did the PC World advert. I put on my own show in a theatre from St Albans, where I lived, and that it was so successful. I did 2 days of this little thrown together show, and I got this, it was so rewarding making my own money from something that I started from scratch myself. So the whole creative process was something I've always loved doing. But I guess for other people, it probably comes at that time at like GCSEs, where you're thinking, oh, what subjects do I want to take? And maybe again a few years later at A-levels. But for me, there was never any question. It was always going to be performing. I do a bit of photography now as well, and I couldn't do them side by side as a option throughout education because it was too much creative. So I had to do a language and I had to do a science or something. So, and that wasn't my parents, that was school. Like, they wouldn't allow me to do drama, music and photography. I had to choose one or the other. I couldn't do all of them. So photography was always just a little side passion that I enjoyed, and now I'm trying to make it a bit more of a viable career option to support the performing, because as we know, performing isn't the most reliable source of work.
So, I mean, we could get into quite a long discussion just on that from an educational point of view, because if you're generally a naturally creative person, I think, almost force feeding you, because you have your standalone subjects, English and maths, that you have to do. And then beyond that, it's almost like you have to pick one from each hat. Like they're still figuring out that you're figuring out what you want to do. And for
Yeah.
some people at a young age, they might already be there. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to go to a sports college, and that was, well, I want to do sport and I'll take extra sport on top of the sport, and then I'll pick sport as another subject. Whereas I do feel like that point you've articulated there, I don't want to brush over that, because actually there's a lot of people out there who feel like they perhaps almost have to close down a creative avenue that they've got because the system doesn't allow them to do it. So how did you navigate that?
With a lot of frustration, actually. It looking back on it actually fills me with such disappointment, I guess, because while the school I was at was actually really nourishing, I guess, of talent in any capacity, whether that was performing, sport, you know, just clever kids. They were really good at encouraging it. But obviously the system that the school has to conform to as well was still there and is still there. So you couldn't, the option wasn't allowed. It wasn't that the school wouldn't allow me, it was that they weren't allowed to, you know, say, yeah, you go and do all these creative things. And I guess the thing is, it has to work for everyone. I understand that, because not everybody is creative either. So they have to, the way that the structure has to enable people to try a bit of everything. But for someone like me, it just meant that for the subjects that I had to do, that I didn't want to do, I very much didn't excel in. And I just always felt like I was always telling myself, oh, you're really dumb, you're really stupid, you're not clever at these sorts of things. And I've definitely brought that into my adult life, definitely. I now just absolutely run a mile when anything in terms of maths is concerned or anything like that. But for other people, yeah, I think there's a lot of, you get to that, again, GCSE stage where you have careers advisors come in and chat to you about what's next. And I remember I'd always say, oh, you know, I'm going to be an actor, that's just it. And they'd be like, right, so child psychology or like just something. It was always something like that, or like, oh, you can go into being something to do with like counseling and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that would be great, I would probably do well in that, but it's not where my heart lies. Thank you, next. And yeah, so it was just about, I guess for some people, some, you know, teenagers, children, those kind of conversations could really throw them off their goal, thinking, oh, actually it's not a viable option, etc. I think actually my husband, who's a friend of yours, I feel like he had a conversation with the teacher once where he said, oh, I want to be a stuntman. And they were like, that's not a real job. My brother is a stuntman and doing really well as a stuntman. So it's one of those things where you kind of don't real. And even my brother said the other day he didn't realize it was a real job when he was a kid. And actually he's living the life that he would have dreamt he could have lived now. But growing up, he didn't realize it was an actual real job. He kind of just thought only Bruce Lee did that.
Do you know what's absolutely fascinating? And without kind of getting too much ahead of the spoilers, in one of my future episodes, although I'm not sure how far in the future, we've got a guy coming on who runs a school out in Australia, and it's a very forward-thinking school. It's basically a sixth form. It's probably the best. I mean, the school system's different out there, but in my head, it's a sixth form. And basically, if you go there because you have an interest in surfing, and every day the school day starts at 7 a.m. You surf from 7 till say 9. You then go in, you have to do English and maths. That's a stipulation by the state. And once you finish English and maths mid to late morning, you then get basically asked, what is the career you think you want to do? And if you want to be a marketing director, you go and work in a marketing company, you get experience in that. If you want to be an actor, you go and do that. If you want to work in a hospital, you go and experience that. So by the time you come out at 18 and then decide on university, you've already had a few years experience of actually what that career could look like, and maybe go, that is for me or it's not for me. But I really like that kind of holistic way of developing people, because to be honest, the world is so different to what it was when the educational system was structured the way it is now. And if you ask a lot of young people what they want to do, actually it's something that doesn't tick the right boxes of what the school system is. So I do feel like we've got a lot of square pegs going into round holes at the moment. So So you've got through your GCSEs, you've done the subjects that some you've chosen, some you've been forced to do. What came next, and how was that transition going into the next step, if you like, of actually pursuing that career?
So that was applying for drama schools, which is some of them you apply through UCAS as you would a normal university, and some you apply privately. Each one of them has an extortionate audition fee as well. I think RADA is like £90 to audition for. That's just to audition, but that's just a sign up. And so I don't know. Do you have to pay to apply to universities? I don't think. Do you? No.
No, I mean you pay a lot when you get there.
Yeah, sure. But it's the same. That's the same as like performing arts schools. If you go to one that's not a university as well, so you still come out with a degree, but you're paying. Some of them, when I was at university, were like 15 grand a year, which I know is like the normal university rates now, but when I was, it was like the 9 grand a year. So there were some schools that weren't linked to unis that were even more. It's crazy. But yeah, so you apply for drama schools. Sometimes you don't even get offered an audition because so many people apply. Then you get an audition if you're lucky. Go along. Usually 3 times. So you have the first round, second round, third round, but usually they're all on different dates as well. And sometimes they could be just a quick in and out thing. And some places where they were like a whole day workshop. And then, yeah, so I got into Central School of Speech and Drama, which is where I ended up going. And I only auditioned for 4 places, I think. That was actually the only place I got into. And yeah, kind of just went from there. Had 3 years training doing acting and musical theatre. And then in your final year, you do showcases for agents and you go off and become rich and famous. But in my final year of drama school, I tore a vocal fold, which is your vocal cords. I'd torn one, which I guess was a combination of probably partying too much and alongside performing all the time at school and things, using my voice way too much when it was tired and just stretching it beyond its capabilities. And I hadn't known that I'd done the damage, so it healed incorrectly. So I had to then have laser surgery on it to remove the scar tissue. And then I had to be mute for 2 weeks. So that was all in my 3rd year of drama school, which kind of massively disrupted my time in that last year, which was a bit of a shame, but I still did well and had a good time. But yeah, then graduated in 2012, like I said earlier. And yeah, that's how it goes, I guess, for the generic path into performing, from education, if you haven't come from a family where there's links to the industry, or if you haven't been a lucky person to have landed a decent role without training, which some people do.
So let's talk next steps then, because there's again a huge difference even in any industry, going through university and actually looking at all of the training and learning part of it, and then actually walking out the front door and now I've got to stand on my own 2 feet, if you like, and actually make ends meet, but actually get these opportunities and seek out those opportunities. So how did you go about that? And also for the people that I think see that nice straight line when you're in the careers meeting at 16 and they say, yes, you do this GCSE, this A level, then you get your degree, and then you walk into this job and that's it, and you live happily ever after. Let's talk about what that's actually like.
Well, from a performing world, for me it was just I remember having an agent meeting with however many agents I spoke to, and I was always like, I'm never gonna do panto. Don't even think about signing me up for cruises. You come out and you think, oh my gosh, who would take Coronation Street? That is just so beneath me. I'm going to work for the Royal Shakespeare Company and for the National, and then I'm going to get a film directed by Kenneth Branagh. And that, I genuinely do believe we all came out thinking a little bit like that was how it worked. And it's definitely not that. It's very much you get a job working front of house in a theatre and selling ice creams, and you meet people there. Loads of people I met through front of house work even, and some you know, the big West End people, like the one week they're working in a West End show, the next week their contract's up and they're back working front of house. Like, it is crazy. You can walk in. Well, when I graduated, you would walk into a theatre and actually possibly see somebody that you were seeing in a huge show the week before now serving you ice cream. So I guess that was probably a first reality hitter for me when I went and got a job working at Wicked. I was speaking to people and working with people who had just finished in Matilda and things like that, and I was like, oh damn, this really isn't an easy career. Not that I ever thought it was easy, but you know, people who'd worked in incredible jobs are now doing the same thing as me. It was a bit of a harsh reality wake up call, and yeah, I think a lot of the time as well, I know there's some schools that do prepare you for like creating your own work, which I think is a really important thing for performers, because actually, unless you're prepared to work for free and do all of the free fringe stuff, which is great, and it is so much fun going to the Edinburgh Fringe and getting all the experience and things, and so much stuff does get picked up from doing fringe that you can't really knock it, but that stuff has a shelf life too. It's like, well, great, I've just spent so much money at uni for 3 years, now I'm working for free in fringe theatre. How do you get into the big stuff? And it's from where I was sitting, it just looked like you either have to have the best agent, which is, you know, so hard to do if you're in a big class, or in the year before me, they all kind of got quite good agents. And in my year, we couldn't get them in to see the shows for some reason. So quite a few people left without an agent. Some people left with small agents, and small agents are amazing as well. Sometimes it pays better to be with a small agency rather than being a small person in the big pond. But yeah, so there's so many different answers to that question, really. But I did not come out feeling, when I walked into my first professional audition for Wicked, I just remember coming out and being like, well, I was not prepared for that. That was just the material I took in, the other people that I heard going into the rooms and stuff, and watching other people and their confidence. And I just thought I just didn't feel that prepared. And I don't know whether that was me, whether that was my training, or whether that's just how everybody is when they first graduate. But it definitely didn't feel like I was going to, I don't know, it didn't feel like things were on the right path from the get-go, which is a shame. Because you come away with a lot of arrogance, I think, leaving drama schools. You kind of go, I've just left the school where Judi Dench trained, so that's who I'm going to become. So yeah, there's a lot of humbling, I guess, about leaving it. Yeah, sorry, I'm just rambling now.
No, not at all. And I think it's the reality that actually, you know, we've got parents that listen to this, we've got young people in schools and colleges and universities listening to this, and actually it's important that they hear that, because I think too often I remember sitting in, I can't remember even what it was called now, but there was this program that you had for careers guidance, and you could basically put in there, like, it was almost like a personality test, but you'd only put in like 3 things. It's like, what are you interested in? Travel, something else, and something else. Do you have a minimum salary expectation? Yes, at least £50,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're going to be a pilot. Like, but am I?
Am I? I can't see.
And it was that sort of, and I do remember and I'm sure everyone's on their journey, and actually the reality of I guess the brochure, the expectation when you're looking at it from the luxury of being at school, and we look back and go, school's incredible. How can we, well, you think when you're at school, you're like, I can't wait to get out there and do the job or whatever it is that I'm looking to do. But actually school was the absolute best time, because you had none of those pressures of mortgages, electricity bills, children, all of these sorts of things come along. So at what point did you feel like it did start to turn a corner, if you like, and actually you had those experiences where you thought, this was worth it?
So it's always been worth it, don't get me wrong. It was just you get knocked down a few pegs, I think, when things don't go the way you planned them to. But for me, actually, it was when creating your own work actually has been something that's saved me in the industry in a way, because it keeps you creative, but it's amazing being able to live off of something that you have put all of your hard work into, and you're not not piggybacking, but you're not relying on someone else and things like that, which has been really great. And two of my best friends from drama school, we formed a little girl group together, and we played at Hyde Park, at sport events, at the Royal Parks half marathon. We were on stage there for their entertainment throughout the day, and we just did so many awesome things together that that was the first kind of moment, I think, for me, where I was like, oh, actually, it's not just about waiting for the work to come to you. You have to go out and make the work happen. I actually saw a interview with two celebrities, and I can't remember who they are. I can't remember who it was, but two really famous actors, and they kind of said the same. I think one of them went to Bristol Old Vic drama school, and he said that they were really encouraged to produce their own stuff and create their own stuff, and that's actually, I think, how he ended up making his career and getting noticed as an actor, by putting on his own work. And yeah, actually, for me, most of my successes, I guess, have come from being a nice person and meeting other people who then go, oh, actually, I've got a job that you might be good for, that you might want to do. And rather than, grafting and emailing people all day being like, please see me for this job, please see me for this job, it's such a nicer reality when you get offered when someone introduces you to the work, which I was telling you yesterday about the Derren Brown job. That was like my first experience of that, where I had a teacher actually from drama school message me on Twitter and said, oh, hey, how are you doing? Do you fancy coming and being a performer in a TV program for Channel 4? And I was like, oh yeah, tell me more. But the answer basically was, I can't tell you more, it's secret and you're not allowed to know anything until you get there, but I'm part of it, so it's kosher. So I kind of had to trust this guy, and then he told me an email address to get in touch with, and so I emailed this woman, and she sent me back. She said, oh, actually, we're looking for a few more people if you know anyone. So I then became the headhunter as well, and messaged a few friends, said, oh yeah, I don't know anything about it, but come along and do this thing. And it was the apocalypse, which was where Derren Brown hypnotized a guy into thinking that it was the end of the world and that humans had turned into zombies. So we got onto this bus at probably about 5 a.m. in London, all had to put our phones into a box, and we weren't told anything until that point. And then once our phones were in the box, they were like, right, we are going to do this. Hope that's fine. But yeah, so that was my in with that job. And actually having the in that as well benefited me a few days later. On the final day of shooting, my drama teacher came up to me and was like, right, we've changed the way the show's going. We've written in another character last minute because we don't think that what they'd written was going to work. So I then had to, at 21, become a late 40-year-old woman, half infected by being a zombie, coming to meet my husband, who was one of the other actors who was in the scenario with the guy who'd been hypnotized. And and I only got that because he kind of vouched for me and was like, oh yeah, she's good, she's fine. So it definitely, I've benefited from knowing people, if you like, in that respect. So yeah, it's a tough industry, that's for sure. It's not one that there is no rhyme or reason to anything. People love hiring new graduates because people love giving people new work, but also people love hiring people that they've worked with before and they trust. So if you're not one of those people, and if you kind of have fallen beneath the cracks a little bit, you really have to work hard to get yourself seen. And a lot of the time that comes from putting your own work out there, keep on going to classes. It's like, I think so many people as performers, they finish drama school and they're like, I'm a trained actor now, I'm a trained singer, I'm a trained dancer. But in actual fact, you know, athletes don't stop training. People don't stop, you know, you might stop if you're a banker, you know all the maths in the world, you might stop going on courses to further your maths development. But sorry, that was really kind of squashing bankers. Bankers, you're great. But yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of it where you have to keep going to classes, and there's so much out there as well. I mean, so many of the casting directors go along and do sessions with people, and you can go and do some monologues and stuff, and that's a really good way to meet people that you're not being able to get seen by.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about Legoland.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because at some point we are going to get your brother on, and it was fascinating having the conversation yesterday. Obviously I didn't prompt you, and you talked about that experience, and I find that fascinating with two people with very different careers, but actually a single experience, if you like, actually becoming quite an interesting waypoint in your journey. So can we explore that a little bit?
Yes. So my brother is a stuntman. Before he became a stuntman, he was a gymnast. He was part of the GB Kids squad. I don't know, what was he? He performed. He was
very good. He was
very high up in gymnastics.
One of his teammates has quite a few Olympic medals. So
yes.
Very good.
The most Olympic medals, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. Is that true? Yeah, I think. Anyway. Yeah. So we had very different lives. He was a gymnast and went to gymnastics all day, every day, competed around the world, etc. And then I was doing the opposite, prancing around, playing make-believe, and refusing to do any kind of sit-up or anything like that. I can barely do a roly-poly, he taught me a few years ago. And he was at college and just wasn't enjoying it. We're just not academic at all kind of people. And he was doing kind of sports therapy or something to do with helping people, and yeah, he just wasn't enjoying it, and he was begging my parents to let him quit. And I said to my mum, I said, Mum, please don't let him quit without something else to do, because otherwise he might just fall to the sidelines a bit, because by this point as well he'd quit gymnastics full time and was trying out other things, because, you know, he was a teenager and wanted to experience teenager stuff. Yeah. So he was doing rugby and meeting girls and stuff, and so my mum was chatting to a guy called Dan Thomas, if you're listening. Hey. We call him Stuntman Dan. So she was having a chat with Stuntman Dan, who used to train down at Sapphire Gymnastics in Hemel Hempstead, where my brother trained. And she said, oh, you know, have you got any advice? What can I do? And he said, actually, how old is he? And I think he was just turning 16, or just turned 16. She said, oh, 16. And he said, well, actually, I work as one of the coaches or something. I can't remember what his actual job is at Legoland, but he kind of oversaw the stunt side of the stunt show at Legoland, and said, oh, bring him along to the auditions and we'll see if he's a good fit. And then he got that job, and that was like really huge for him. At 16, he moved to Windsor, He got a moped license, and his best mate got it as well. He was actually always destined to be a fireman, and he now lives in Vegas working in Cirque du Soleil. Like, it's just crazy how this one job, Legoland, changed so many of our lives. And yeah, so Jake and Ryan got this job at Lego, and then Jake moved to Spain for a bit to be in another show, and then I think that he saw somewhere along one of the Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups that he was in with the Lego guys, and saying that they were looking for the girl narrator role. So he said, "Oh, sis, why don't you go for that?" So he put my name forward, and then I got the job doing that as well. And so we got to be in the show together quite a lot, which was really awesome and just so rare to be able to get to perform with a sibling. And absolutely my favorite thing ever. I love doing things like that with my brothers. Like I produced a show 2 years ago, and my other brother played the drums in that, and performing with people that you've literally known your whole life is just so much fun. And Legoland, if it hadn't been for Legoland, I wouldn't have met Adam. Well, I might have met Adam, but he wouldn't have been so impressed with me, because we met on Tinder. But one of the reasons why he was so enamored with me was because as a kid he'd gone along to Legoland and seen the stunt show and been like, "Oh my god, I want to be a stuntman." Told his career advisor, they squashed it. Then saw that I was in it, thought that I was this cool stunt woman. He found out later that I was not a stunt woman, very much just run around telling people what to do who were doing stunts. And yeah, I guess the rest is history, because from there I got other bits of work, and I got a panto from a guy who worked there and things like that. So it's kind of, yeah, that kick-started quite a lot for me, which is this, I never would have thought that working at a theme park would have been my like booster. But that really, it was a really wonderful job, and I miss it all the time. I live a little bit too far away now. And yeah, it was a great job, and working with my brother is definitely something that I plan to do more of in the future as well. Great would it if we were in like the next James Bond together, although I just watched the most recent James Bond last night. Is there going to be any more James Bonds?
Well, we couldn't
spoiler
say that. Yeah, we wouldn't want to spoil it, but who knows?
Yeah, so if there is, maybe I could be the next James Bond and he could be my stuntman. Just saying, that would be cool. That would be really cool. But it's really cool. I actually worked on the James Corden Cinderella in 2020. And the stunt coordinator on that knew my brother. And so it was quite nice being like, "Oh, my brother." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, great, Jake." And then actually my brother thinks that it was because of that conversation that he then called him in for another job, because it reminded him of my brother, which was nice. I feel a bit like, yeah, that's good.
So I'm a little bit curious now about, I guess, that whole overview of the whole sibling thing. And I say that because it's really, really difficult having one kid that goes in one direction, one kid that goes in another. And if you've got three kids that are all going in different directions from a parent's point of view, that's like a real challenge. So now being a parent yourself, and let's say a little bit more mature and probably less naive than we all were when we were leaving theatre school. When you reflect back on that period, what was kind of your journey like with your siblings? And I guess, again, messages for people out there who have got kids or are, that person trying to find a support mechanism, because I think when we spoke yesterday, that was one of the things you said was a huge factor in your journey, was the support that you guys got.
I think I think it's with anything, to be honest, like any walk of life, even but breastfeeding, it's just so hard to do things successfully if you haven't got support. Just to throw that one in there as a whole other topic that we can talk about another day. But support just from our parents was 100% without doubt the reason why we all are happy doing what we're doing, and in some lights successful. And it's really, I can imagine that, and I know there are a lot of parents out there whose kids come to them and say, "I want to be a dancer, I want to be a stuntman, I want to be a painter," and they look at their kids and say, "Well, that's you know, that's great, but that's never going to work, is it? Like, that's not a real job. You know, you need to have something else. And while that, you know, it can be true, it is, you know, you do need other skills, because as a stuntman, if you get injured, that's your career done. You have to have other things that you can put your hand to. So absolutely encourage your children to not put all their eggs in one basket, but don't discourage their passion, because what's the point? What is the point if you don't enjoy what you're doing? And I know there's so many people out there who don't know what they want to do, and I've always been quite envious of those people, the people who just are happy with a 9 to 5 and saving up for a holiday every quarter and just going home on a Friday and not thinking about work until Monday. I just would love to be like that, but I'm not wired that way. And for people like me who aren't happy with the 9 to 5 and don't enjoy the normal stuff, it needs to be supported and it needs to be nurtured. And the fear that the parents have can really manifest itself into something much bigger in for the kids. Like, it can really ruin and quash dreams, which no parent wants to do, but equally they don't want to build their kids up for, you know, failure in life, because it is hard. So it is a hard line to walk, because there's part of me that sometimes goes to my parents, why did you encourage this career? It's such a burden. But Lauren of the past would not have stood for them getting in my way. I would have hated my parents if they had, and luckily we have such an amazing relationship, and the same with my brothers. And that literally does come from the fact that my parents, for 20 odd years, have given up their time to drive Jake to Huntingdon every 2 weeks for gymnastics competitions, drive him to Hemel Hempstead every single day after school for gymnastics club. And we used to house exchange gymnasts from Slovenia and other countries. And then at the same time as one of my parents was driving him to Hemel and other countries and flying around the world with him, they were coming to see me in shows and taking me to Amdram, and the expense of that as well is astronomical. And then when they had a third baby 11 years later who wants to be a drummer, they've now built him a shed at the bottom of the garden, which all the neighbours absolutely resent them for, probably. And my dad, every single gig that my brother has, he pays for more than the amount of people going's worth of tickets, in terms of the family, not the whole venue. But every time he'll just flat out buy like 10 tickets, because that's a prerequisite to getting gigs for some bands. They have to prove that they can get a certain amount of people through the door. My dad's always like, yeah, great, we have to do that. And for those people who aren't as fortunate, because, you know, I have to acknowledge there that our privilege of my parents being able to pay for those things, because actually they're all really, like, drama, especially the performing world, is so expensive. But there's so much out there that you don't realise. There's bursaries, which I never knew about really until it was a bit too late, until I was having to pay for surgery. And there's bursary, and there's also, like, people love to support kids doing things that they love doing. So bring and buy sales, or like bake sales, or like I did, putting on your own shows as a kid and doing sponsored things. There are other ways to get around it, which also I think gives the kids an appreciation for how hard you have to work to get your goals. So, you know, while it is great to just flash the cash and get your kids what they want there and then, actually, for some people it works so much better to say, yes, you can absolutely do that, we'll pay half, you pay the other half, how can we get the money? Right, you can do some car washing, or you could, you know, whatever. Yeah. So, you know, I totally acknowledge that I am from a very fortunate, privileged background. But there are, you know, there are other avenues as well to pursue if you're not so fortunate. But that really does take hard work as well. So I you know, it's a hard one. But support.
I think that's a really interesting point there, because if I think back to like the sporting advice that I give to a lot of parents and young athletes, is that sometimes you can have all the facilities, the money, the coaches, all of that around you, and that's still not enough. Actually, there is an element, like it or not, there's an element of right place, right time.
Mm-hmm.
If and picking some basic examples, if again, it's probably not public knowledge, but if you want to compete for Scotland at this summer's Commonwealth Games, there's a 50% smaller team than if you happen to compete for England, because it's a home Commonwealth Games in England and they happen to have more things. Now, and it's the same with the Olympics in London in 2012, we took the biggest team you can possibly imagine. If you went to the last Olympics, the team's probably 50% of that size.
Yeah.
Now, you can't plan for those sorts of things to happen. So I think there is an element of luck, but also there's an element of putting yourself out there, like you said, because realistically, if you're, going and doing the front of house work, going out and meeting people, going and volunteering at events, going and doing that, yeah, you might get lucky, but actually, if an opportunity appears, you can guarantee you're going to grab it with two hands. Whereas, like you say, people, I think, in any walk of life often expect to graduate or get the certificate or do whatever line of work they're in, the qualifications, and then the work just comes to them. And it's like, it might, if you're really lucky, but realistically, it's probably not. So I think that's a really important message to kind of get out there, because it doesn't matter whether you want to be an actor or anything else. It's not going to just roll to your front door without you doing anything.
It is hard, and actually, I guess I would really encourage people to look outside of their own networks. So go, right, you want to be an actor, okay, great. Not necessarily who do I know who's another actor, but maybe who do I know who's a writer? Who do I know who's a choreographer? Because actually, unfortunately, other actors can't really do that much for each other. There's, I've got some friends who are in Hollywood films who, live at home with their girlfriend who's an actress who's teaching kids every Saturday because she can't get a break. And it's like, well, actually, he couldn't get her in. So it's not, had her boyfriend been a writer, maybe he could have written her a part in something, or maybe, do you know what I mean? So it's, I think from the parents' perspective, if you want to support your children, you want to encourage it, but you don't want to just, tunnel vision them in that direction because you are aware it's a risky career, which it is, then maybe, like that. So I don't want to be a writer myself at the moment. Sometimes I enjoy it, but my whole life I've always gone, I want to be an actor. Everyone always says to me, why don't you write something, do this, do that? And I always used to get really frustrated because I was like, I'm not a writer, I'm an actor. I prefer performing the work. I don't want to make it. My opinion has changed nowadays, but had I had friends who were into writing plays, then actually maybe I could have put their work on and helped myself along that way. So I think that's just something that's just come to me now, actually, like, have a look outside of that career and see what's linked to it that can actually, you can help them at the same time as them helping you, and yeah, just make those connections as well, rather than just the person you want to be and following them around.
It's interesting, and I think a lot about, I guess we talked about the parent aspect of it, both for yourself and for your parents, but there must be a huge element of pride, even if it's, I'm sure it is spoken, but an element of, we did all of that, the hard yards, if you like, to get our kids to follow their ambitions and their dreams. And you can sit back now and go and watch you do your various performing on stages and on TV. You can go on Netflix and watch Jake do his things in a Marvel film, and then you can go and see your brother performing at a gig. And actually, as a parent, that you just want your kids to be happy and to sit back, there must be a huge element of pride there, I would imagine.
Oh my gosh, I mean, I feel that as an older sister. I just, watching both of my brothers fills me with the most amount of joy. Like, I remember the first time I saw Jake, even in the pirate show at Legoland, I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, he's so awesome. This is amazing. Like, that's my brother. And then the first time I saw him fire breathing, I'd like to say the first time I saw him in a film, but because he's a stuntman, you don't actually see him. You kind of, like, he's just flying around in the background. But the first time I saw his name in a film at the end credits, that's epic. That is just such a wonderful buzz. and Bradley, like, he supported Top Loader a couple of weeks ago in Brixton, and it's really amazing to see. And so I can't imagine how it feels as a parent. I mean, when Junie claps, I am very, very proud. So I can't imagine what I'll be like when she does whatever she ends up wanting to do. But yeah, I will support her no matter what. Even if she wants to be a banker, I will support her, and I'll get her tutors, because I will not be able to help at all. I can give her my accountant's number. But yeah, no, it's a really fun life. It's hard, but you can make a success even if you're not, famous and all the rest of it. You can still. I keep my head above the water. I have a mortgage. I'm married. I'm happy. I've travelled so much, and a lot of that is because of performing. So yeah, there's just it's definitely not a career to just push off just because you know how hard it is. Like, everything's hard.
And it's applying your passion to that hard work, so it doesn't feel like work. Because you talk about the 9 to 5 and people being able to switch off. They switch off from their work, whereas I'm the same. And when me and Adam have our conversations, all of those sorts of things, we don't switch off because we don't treat our work as work. We enjoy what we do, and we get to spend however many hours we choose to invest each week, very much beyond the hours we're paid for. Because actually, for us, it's fascinating. It's the kind of thing that gets the best out of us. So I guess I've got 2 more things I want to ask. The first one is, again, looking back with your wiser head on, what are the superpowers that have got you to where you are now that perhaps you probably weren't aware of at the time? What are those skills, habits, behaviors that have put you in good stead to get you to this point?
Definitely resilience. Knowing what your goals are, like knowing what you want from life. Like, yes, it changes, but knowing what you'll accept to make you happy, and not faltering on that. Don't just take things just because they're there. If do it because it makes you happy. And I think that's, for me, the biggest driving force of everything is, will it make me happy? If it doesn't pay me a dime, but it fills me with absolute joy, then I would rather do that than live in a big house, for example. So I think, knowing what makes you happy is one thing. And actually, they both kind of are just making sure you're happy, because I think that's what life is about. But also not letting real life not happen as well, because I think there was a long time where I think it's important to go to your friends' weddings. I think it is important to go to a funeral. I think it's important to be with people on special occasions. And there's so much about the performing industry that makes you feel like you can't do that stuff because, well, I have to, because the show must go on. I have to be there because if I don't, I'll miss this opportunity. When in actual fact, I think releasing that was actually instrumental for me in enjoying the ride, because otherwise you just it can become a bit of an obsession. And I think giving yourself the freedom to say no to things is really important, and I've only recently learned that. So with my wiser head, I would definitely say choosing what makes you happy from a work perspective. So going like, I'm not doing this just because of the money, I'm doing this because X, Y, and Z, because ultimately it's probably going to make me very tired, because anything performing tends to have long hours involved. And you can't say yes to a lot of social commitments and things. But then equally going, right, for example, I actually had my wedding was in 2018, and I got onto the live rounds of X Factor, With it was another like weird nudged in by a recommendation from someone who worked on it, and had I got further along, it would have clashed with my wedding. And at the time, I was like, yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of the business, isn't it? Obviously, I'm going to take X Factor, and I think that is just the wrong attitude. I think you have to put real life stuff first sometimes as well, and it's really hard to do as a budding performer. It's really, really difficult to know that, to make plans. Basically, you just are always like, oh, maybe. Depends what I'm doing, and that's sad, because you can really miss out on life if you do that too much. Sorry, but that wasn't really answering your question.
It was.
Was it? Yeah,
it was, and I think it's interesting whether that's a period of time it takes.
It is definitely.
But also, I mean, from my own journey, I can pinpoint a moment where I came out of sport for 14 months and went into a sales role in London, or account management role as it was titled. And in the application process to get to that, I applied for, I don't know, maybe 10 different roles. And I remember walking into a room, and for some context, when I left my last job, I was on 24k. That was based near where I was. And there was a commuting job in London. I remember going into the office, and the guy said to me, do you want to earn £90,000 a year? And my eyes went like this, and I was just like, ting, ting, ting. I was picking out my Ferrari, all of that insane stuff when someone says that to you. And I remember sitting in the interview, and then he said, oh, we've got an aptitude test or something you had to do. And he put me in this room, and then he left me for like half an hour to fill in this paperwork. And up on the wall was the phone number tallies of the team that had been doing these various sales calls. And the minimum number on there was 150 phone calls a day. And I asked him afterwards, I said, what's your working hours? And he said, oh, generally, no one gets in after 8. And generally speaking, no one leaves probably before 6. And I'm thinking it's an hour and a half for me to get from my house to here. So I was sitting there going, if I earned £90,000 a year, I would never spend it, because I'd wake up, come to work, get home and go to bed. And then the weekend I'd be so exhausted. And it was, anyway, I didn't end up going for the job after going through the application process. But actually, it was the first time I actually stepped back and went, hold on, if you want to find a career that's going to satisfy you, you need to stop looking past the dollar signs. Yes, you've got to pay your bills and all those sorts of things, but you're going to spend upwards of 40 hours a week for a good chunk of your life doing what you set yourself up to do. And actually, do you enjoy it? And I think there's a really powerful kind of message that you've brought out there of looking back and actually saying there is more to life than just your work stuff, and make sure you've got a job that allows you to have that, because some people are desperate for whatever job it is, but the knock-on effect it has on the rest of their life, but perhaps they don't appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, isn't it? Like, you don't want to just work until you die. And the amount of people that do, like, you check in your pension, and then it's just, oh, see ya. Like, it's just so sad. So it's like, let's change that.
So there's the final question, and I ask it to all my guests in various forms. And we discussed this yesterday, so I'm going to go with the latter option. If you could go back to 10-year-old Lauren, who had already discovered she had a massive passion for this, but was unsure of what would come next, what would you say to that young girl?
I would say, I would say, oh gosh, there's so much that I would say, because part of me, a lot of what I would say contradicts what I've just said, and that was, don't worry about the social side of things, because as a kid, as a teenager, I definitely got sidelined by boys and friends and all the rest of it, as I think everyone does. And now I'm like, curse you, if you'd tried harder then. Just take every opportunity, and don't be scared of failure. There's this one audition that I never went to, because it was while I was at drama school, and it was for one of the shows to find the next Andrew Lloyd Webber star, and I will always regret not going to that. So if I could say do this one thing, it would have been that. Go to that show, go to that audition. But yeah, I think it just keep working hard. I think I would just always say keep working hard, and maybe do a few dance classes, because I can't dance, and that has definitely been an Achilles heel of mine. And yeah, I don't think I'd do anything particularly different, to be honest. So I feel like I just say keep on going and keep enjoying it, and thank your parents lots.
That's a very lovely way to pull it together. And I think I've been woodpeckering you for about a year to kind of get this together, and I think I'm going to have to go for probably another year to get Adam to come on and do it. But it's been really, really enjoyable to go through this, because I think it's I guess, unless you've got an experience in that industry, which a lot of people don't, you see the veneer. You might just see I've heard that person on stage, or you watch an X Factor and you just see that linear line and think, well, that's it. So I think for a lot of people who don't understand that industry, it's given them a real insight and some very honest reflections. So Lauren, thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome.
Thank you. I apologise if I waffled a lot. I do tend to do that. So Kev will probably edit all of my ums and buts out.
I'm leaving every single bit in.
Oh, good. Excellent. Even the bit about my mum thinking this was swimming.
Yeah, that's how it started, and that's how it's going to finish.
Oh, love it. Right, well, thank you, Kev, for having me. And I look forward to hearing all your other podcasts in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. And don't forget, we've got a back catalogue of content that goes all the way back to January 2020, including fighter pilots, Olympic champions, TV presenters, and inspiring authors. We'd really appreciate it if you can give us a quick rate and review, however you're joining us today. And if you don't want to miss out on any future episodes, make sure you hit subscribe. Our community update drops once a month, and we've got some great guest content being added, so be sure to sign up for that. And finally, we're all about inspiring and supporting as many people as possible. So if you can share this episode with one person that you think would enjoy it, that would be really cool. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Rogue Monkey Podcast.